Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen. We've got our fifth round of the AFVRC season. And, well, for the first time this year, we head outside of the British Isles. We head to Spa-Francorchamps, one of the most iconic circuits on the motor racing calendar. And, well, we've got a new face in the commentary box for this one. It's myself, Joseph Black, and I'll be alongside Max Ring for today's action. And, well, it's going to be a very, very good one indeed. I think we're going to get some very, very good action out there. But before we get going for today's action, we've got a little bit of keeping to do, a little bit of housekeeping to do, haven't we, Max?
Yes, we certainly do indeed, Joseph. Of course, he's here for the first time this season, but we do have to decide next week's race with a little bit of a spin wheel. Of course, it is the mystery round, Joseph, and as you can see, here is the track selection, and it's all, of course, the free content tracks, isn't it, Joseph? So it should be rather interesting because these drivers would have had a lot of time, especially on this game, on these circuits.
Yeah, they certainly will. So just to run you through it, we have the Charlotte Motor Speedway, Oschersleben, Virginia International Raceway, Circuito de Nevada, and Summit Point on our spin wheel to decide. This is, of course, for next week's round of racing. So all different countries. So we've got America in there, we've got Japan thrown in, Oschersleben as well, which is, of course, in Europe. So the other two completely outside. But without further ado, let's get on with deciding next week's race. And, well, we'll see what the drivers will be racing around. And, well, the spin wheel going around, the drivers hoping to avoid that both tonight and next week. It's going to land on, is it Summit Point? No, just about tipping over to Circuito de Navarro. And I'm a personal big fan of Circuito de Navarra, in fact, in northern Spain. It should be a good one, the European circuit. Of course, the only MSV circuit outside of the UK. But I'm a big fan of racing around it personally.
Yeah, I'm quite a fan of the circuit. Of course, it's certainly a track that will challenge these drivers, especially that first corner where you're kind of braking while turning into it, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how these cars do handle around a circuit like that. Plenty of high-speed corners as well, Joseph, especially coming out of the likes of turn 2 down through 3 and 4. So it should be rather interesting as we now head trackside to the end of practice. And as you guys can see on your screens, yes, that is right. We have had some rain here in Spa. It is here in qualifying, sorry. And we are now getting underway for what should be 20 minutes of qualifying. Not many laps can be done around a circuit like Spa in this kind of format, Joseph. And this rain will make laps even longer and even harder.
Certainly will. Traction will be a big problem around this circuit here today, especially if the rain does continue throughout the session. You can see the windscreen wipers going, so it is raining currently out on the circuit, you would imagine, and you can see the streaks of rain on the dash, just demonstrating that problem. Craig Ledoux then will be the first driver, I think, to be setting a lap time, getting a sumptuous bit of slipstream up to the most iconic corners on the racing calendar, Eau Rouge and Raidillon, before they head down the Kemmel Straight and down towards the second sector. Then this is just one iconic corner after another, and it'll be very fun to see the drivers racing around here tonight, overtaking opportunity into that complex and also down into the next braking zone that Craig's about to come up to. Now, there is plenty of chances. You'd expect that with a lap of just over 7 kilometers.
Yeah, there certainly is, and around, especially in cars like these, the corners, unlike F1 cars, you do need to brake that little bit harder, and you need to brake that little bit earlier, so it does invite more overtaking opportunities around Spa and, of course, into the likes of Poole. And we could see drivers potentially risk going side by side if they get a nice run at the Jackie X curve. But for Ledoux, as you could see, just really feathering that throttle to keep the car rotated through. And, of course, in this rain as well, the car going to be constantly sliding out underneath you, and you've got to avoid those inside apex curves because, of course, you could see that puddle just covering the racing line. So you have to take more of a wider line through these corners. As we now head down into Stavolo, does tap that inside apex, runs a little bit too far out wide than what he would have hoped. And now through the curve of the Paul Freya for Craig Ledoux, of course, the leader of the AM category championship. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. Of course, if you are new here, AM drivers are with the pink next to their names. Pro drivers are with the green. And as we head through Blanchimont now with Ledoux, Joseph, it seemed like a very tidy lap. Maybe a few mistakes here and there, but of course, getting used to the rain, you're expecting some drivers to slowly be starting to build confidence.
Yeah, and there'll be lines formed as they head throughout this race session, or this qualifying session even, as Ledoux's going to come to the end of his first lap, and we get a good reference, a 2:34.997 for himself, putting himself, of course, up at the top and also at the bottom of the standings as everybody else is getting ready to fill it out now. The circuit is getting filled up, and Ethan Lee is going to go quickest of all. Everybody into the 34s apart from Matthew Forrest just behind, and more lap times will be thrown in, but it's Ethan Lee at the very top of the standings at the moment, a 2-minute 24.3, I believe that is, right at the very top of the standings. You'll have to excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, my eyesight is not the best, but we have more drivers coming through to set their laps. Chris Boland will be the next one, but this is not going to be a lap time that's particularly representative for him, so maybe he's had to back off, maybe he's had to back out, maybe he's invalidated on this lap, which means he's going to have to go all over again, and it means he'll have an over 3-minute lap. That will harm him, but of course it'll only be about 20 seconds that he's lost in the end, so it will be a very interesting one indeed as the lap times come down. You don't really have much of an opportunity to make mistakes here because, of course, as we see, it's a 2-minute 30 to 3-minute lap. So you're only going to get about 4 or 5 more laps in before the checkered flag is waved.
Certainly, indeed, and of course this is what makes a circuit like Spa when it comes to these qualifying sessions, when you don't have something like 40 minutes to half hour to get a lap time on the board, and you've got to get it done in these short, quick formats, and you only get a certain amount of time to get those tyres into working condition, and you've got to really start to rag the car about and maybe just push that a little bit too soon on the tyre to get the best out of the session. So far for Ethan Lee, this is the best we've seen of him so far. He is currently, of course, a few tenths faster than Jack Goring, but of course a few tenths around Spa is nothing at all, because it's very easy to find a time around a circuit as long as this, of course, just over 7 kilometers in length. And for Ben Cullen, as he now makes his way down into Campus Corner, just avoids that puddle on the inside, just taking that wider outside line, which of course is quicker in the rain, and the dry line will slowly start to form. This track will get better as this session progresses. As he makes his way out of Stavolo once more. For once so far this season here, Joseph, we don't see Will Fulks at the top of the times as Ben Cullen through the curve of the Paul Freya had a big snap of oversteer there. Somehow kept the car facing in the right direction. But for the 909 machine, making his way up into Blanchimont now, this has seemed to be a very competitive start to the lap. Is he going to be able to hang on to the end as Ledoux goes fastest, showing that track evolution really coming into play?
He certainly is at the moment. Right at the very top of the field is Ledoux. Is Ben Cullen going to be able to challenge with his first lap on the board? I'm not sure whether his first lap will be particularly right up there. But of course, with the track evolution as it is, he could be throwing himself right into contention up to the line then for Ben Cullen. And it'll be a lap time of a 2-minute 34.481. So he is going to throw himself into contention, even if he's not right at the very top of the field at the moment. But he does find himself on the front row. So not too bad from the 909 at the moment. Right up there at the very top of that field. James King coming through the second sector, the number 23, hoping to challenge for something in this qualifying session early on. But don't forget, the early on parts of this qualifying session doesn't mean all too much, because it's all down to the crunch time right at the very end in a couple of laps time to see where they're able to go. But at the moment, Ledoux on pole position overall, despite being part of the AM class, so a very good performance from himself. And in fact, Glimberry also into the top few drivers, and so not too bad from himself as well. James King up to the line to go up into the top 10, 9th for himself at the moment. And he's going to hope to find a little bit more time on that lap if he wants to jump into the top contention for this race.
Yeah, certainly will indeed. Of course, with the way this circuit is slowly improving, it could mean if you miss time, the end to your session, if you cross the line that little bit too early to finish your final lap, you could see yourself end the lap up in, say, the front row of the grid and then see yourself tumble nearly all the way to the bottom. That just shows how much track evolution does play a part as Eastwood got onto the curb there on the exit of Blanchimont and got dragged out wide. And now as we head up into the bus stop chicane, very late on the brakes, doesn't hit that first apex too well, will compromise his run through the second part of bus stop. A small slide out the corner up to the line here for Eastwood. What's it going to be for in the AM class as he's about to come across the line now? 2:39.2, and it was an invalidated lap. Wonder if he picked that up at Blanchimont with that slide mid-corner. Scott Darville as he makes his way up into Radion and now down at the Kemmel straight. And we'll see what he can potentially deliver in the 1.73, of course. So far this season, Darville down in 9th. Has had a few decent results where he's had some top 5 finishes, but it's nothing too much of note just yet as he makes his way through the com. Darville so far yet to set a lap time on the board as Goring now goes fastest of all, instantly beaten there by Ben Cullen, and Darville spins, got on a puddle on the exit of Malmedy, and unfortunately for the 1.73 just about keeps it out the wall, but that's that lap in the bin.
Certainly is, and that's what happens when you can go so close to the edge on this lap. What can happen is you can find a puddle and it can throw you off because you don't quite have the traction on one of your tyres as much as you could all the others. Chris Boland continuing through, and I think when you get to that point, you just have to keep the throttle down and pin your way through the rain and through the terrible conditions on the circuit. Of course, it's not terrible conditions overhead, but on the road it seems pretty slippery, which is why the lap times are into the 2:33s. The quickest ones, at least, are into the 2:33s, or in fact, the quickest one from Jack Goring at the moment. But we will see everybody else heading through. This is Chris Boland. He's 8th at the moment in the championship. Will Folks, he finds himself slightly further down. He's in 14th, but they are pretty close, all things considered, in the standings. They are both within the 400s on their in the standings, and there will be not much of a difference in pace, you would imagine, between the two drivers at this early point of the season. Folks now will be heading and hoping to improve on his 34.8 at the moment, and he'll be hoping to jump into the top 5 to see what he can do. And, well, a few more corners to go. Of course, Chris Boland, even less corners as he heads through the final couple and heads through Blanchimont and up to the bus stop chicane to end this lap time for himself, qualifying the first one. That hoping to keep valid is Chris Boland, and we'll see what he is capable of.
Yeah, we'll see what Boland is capable of doing. Of course, for Will Fawkes, he has topped every session he's participated in this season. Of course, took pole and then won both the races last time out. And the same happened in Donington. It's 12th fastest in the pro category for Chris Boland, a 1:36.0 for the number 86 machine. And what makes this circuit even harder, of course, Joseph, is the fact that in the rain, if you go anywhere near those white lines or onto the puddle, your car is spinning round. And that a car that's also got no traction control and ABS, which is so sensitive like this. We've heard it from drivers throughout the season that the cars are very sensitive, as Fawkes goes to the fastest time of all once more. A 2:32.0. 32.0. He's a whole 1.7 seconds clear of Jack Goring. That's a monstrous time from Fawkes. As Darville once again nearly has a slide through Malmedy, but it just shows how, of course, as I was trying to say there, Joseph, how sensitive these cars are to any sort of slide, any sort of locking from the front or rear brakes, which makes this circuit even harder in these conditions. And that's where we could see someone like the AM drivers, like Ledoux, potentially perform better than others, because potentially some of these guys in the pro category haven't had that experience in the rain, so they're still learning themselves.
Yeah, they certainly are, and that was somebody off of the road in the background. Not sure who that would have been, as Pete Plasto finds himself fighting for time at the moment. His best time is a 2:37.374, and he currently finds himself in 15th place in class as it stands, of course, as the splits go. 5 minutes 38 left in this qualifying session, so not long to be able to make an impression, and there's only a couple more laps in it before the checkered flag will wave. A couple of drivers in the pit lane as it stands, so they will not be making it around for too many more laps, nor, in fairness, will the drivers out there on the circuit. They have been able to find the time. It has come down as they headed through the session, but I don't know whether that's down to the change of conditions, but more the fact that they've been able to rubber themselves in and warm up to the session and to the conditions out there on track. Pete Plasto into the wall and just joined in the wall. Who was that going around into the side of Pete Plasto? Either way, they both hit each other and both off of the road. Matthew Forrest was the one who went into his side. There's clearly a struggle on traction up at that corner because that is now 3 drivers gone around.
Yeah, it's certainly entering the corner as well. You just try and get yourself as close to the white line as possible at entry. It's a very quick right-hander. These cars, of course, don't have too much downforce. You try to carry as much speed through as you possibly can, and the rear of the car just constantly wants to rotate on you. And in these conditions, it's just even harder. And it just seems that some drivers may be too aggressive on turning, or even just trying to be too aggressive on the throttle, and it just loops the car around. As you can see in the overall standings, Craig the Jew having one of the best amateur qualifyings of the season. He is 4th fastest overall, and Will Fawkes has just gone a second faster than his previous best. He's now 2.7 seconds in front of championship leader Jack Goring. What is there that this man can't do in the number 31 machine? Ethan Lee has been black flagged. Dan Cross moves himself up into 4th, but for Fawkes here, Joseph, he is giving everyone a masterclass of how to drive in the rain, because so far 2.7 seconds is the gap. Can Goring bring it down, or could Fawkes extend it by even more?
Rain is known to be the great equaliser, and at the moment Will Fawkes is the driver who's been able to make the most of this of these conditions that we've got at the moment. Jack Goring, of course, our championship leader by 40 points. It may well come down today, but of course Will Fawkes with attendance problems that has pushed him further down the order, and so he'll be hoping to be able to fight it up late on. James King to the line. It's a 33.057, so maybe the conditions are switching as the 23 goes up to the front row of the field. 3 minutes to go, so about one more lap in it for all of these drivers to be able to set their lap times, and we will be ticking under 3 minutes left to go with James King heading through the first corner. Everybody ready to set a lap time out there on circuit, and you can see the timing boards updating with everybody coming through. And folks, at the moment, with that gap of 2 seconds, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more drivers that join him in the 31 soon.
Hopefully so, because this could be one of the biggest qualifying margins we see all season long, by just taking that pole position by now 2 seconds after King's brought that gap down. Chris Boland is currently on a lap time as he makes his way up into the bus stop chicane. Of course, we can also say well done to Glenn Burry as well. Of course, is in 2nd fastest of the AM category and down in 8th overall. And as we now see Boland make his way up to the start-finish line, currently 13th fastest overall. Is he going to find an improvement? Yes, he is. Up into 9th fastest, a 2:34.8, so does see himself improve into that top 10, and Chris pushes Scott Darvill out of that top 10 down into 11th fastest. Now Dan Cross currently lies 5th in the 2:63 machine as we head to crunch time here in this qualifying session. James King could be one of the last to cross the line as well, so make sure to keep out the man currently occupying that 2nd spot on the front row. And for Dan Cross, what is it going to be? Is it going to be any sort of improvement? Chris Pauley now goes up to 6th fastest. We have 2 cars behind, squabbling over track position as they start their final runs. Cross to the line. It wasn't an improvement. And for King, what can he do? Can he bring that gap down to Fawkes even more? Or is that 31 machine just a little bit too far in front as he runs off the road and into the gravel? That's going to be that lap over. Luckily, though, he has another opportunity, one of the final opportunities of the session.
Yeah, not too many opportunities left with just under a minute to go. Adam Barron just inside the top 10 in his class at the moment, but 12th overall because of the performances of Glenberry and Craig Ledoux. Very good performances from the two AM drivers to find themselves at the very top. Adam Barron then is going to try and jump into the top 10. He needs to find 3/10 to be able to do so to jump up ahead of Toby Andrews. But of course, everybody else setting lap times, I think he has to find another 10th in himself to be able to get ahead of all of them. 30 seconds left in this session. Everybody ready to come to the line now, and Adam Barron will be the next one to do so. The final corner beckons, the final bus stop chicane for the number 5, and around to the line he will come. Where is this improvement going to be? If it is indeed going to be an improvement, before he got a 2 minute 34.8, this time it's a 2 minute 34.6, so he improves on time but not on position. Who comes through next to the line, and who comes through and improves? Jack Goring is going to find himself in 4th in class and 5th overall, but no more improvements from him as a checkered flag is indeed waved now, so there might still be chances for a couple of these drivers who just crossed the line with seconds to spare. Where is everybody going to stack up? Well, we know where Pete Plasto's going to go as he takes the checkered flag, and it will be up to 3rd place. An incredible final lap to pull out for the 3-1-2, a 32.632. That has come from pretty much nowhere. He was 16th. That 16th place is now occupied by Tom Stevens, who's in the 2nd sector, coming through to the final one, and will be setting times, hopefully, to improve on that 16th place. The track condition seems to have improved magnificently until the final lap, and we will see all of the drivers to the line now. Will Fulks, can he improve? Yes, he can. It's a 30.142 for himself, and it's actually a 141 that sees him on pole by 1.3 seconds ahead of Craig Ledoux in 2nd place. Anybody else wanting to be able to set that time is going to have to do so very soon. It'll be Chris Pauley, who gets apparently a 152.8. I'm not sure how true that one is, as well, he does end off his qualifying session in 8th place overall and 7th place in class. More drivers coming to the line, and he will actually be displaced as Ben Cullen gets a 33.692. Matthew Forrest peaks at 8th, will jump past Chris Pauley with a 34.0. But Will Fulks has this pole position on lock. What a performance from himself. Craig Ledoux coming to the end of his lap now. Where is the number 13 going to find himself? Well, the answer's in the pit lane, because he's not going to improve. Front row for Craig Ledoux, though. An incredible performance for the AM leader.
Oh, certainly. What a performance that is from Craig Ledoux. The closest car in the AM category to him is Glenberry, who's, of course, down in 14th overall. James King falls into the pit lane. He'll start the best from 3rd. Jonathan Murphy, can he displace the AM driver from being on the front row of the grid? As he makes his way out of the bus stop chicane, the car dancing as he applies the throttle. What's it going to be for Murphy? Is it enough? It's just not going to be enough to displace Ledoux, but it is going to be enough for 3rd place and 2nd overall in the pro category. Here comes Adam Barron to the line, currently 14th, fastest across the line for him. He did not improve on that attempt. And for, of course, Chris Pauley, he might have just made it before the line. I think he did. So he's the lone car out on the circuit at the moment. The number 1 machine, currently 9th fastest. Can he see himself potentially moving up into that top 5 at the very least? If not, try and make it to that front row of the grid. Or Craig Ledoux has just pulled out the qualifying of the season. Will Fulks has dominated this session, but the real big headline is the fact that AM Championship leader Craig Ledoux is on that front row of the grid, and Pauley with a slide out of curve to Paul Frey. It's going to be so difficult now for him to try and find an improvement on this lap. Currently tracking around about, I would say at this stage, 2 seconds down on what his previous attempt was, as he now makes his way up into that bus stop chicane. Of course, has got 14 seconds to make it through this chicane and find an improvement. What's it going to be for the number 1, though? Of course, 9th fastest for now. Another small slide out of the bus stop chicane. Up to the line we shall go. Can he displace the Jew across the line? No, he just falls short as well. Will go up into 3rd overall. No, he must have invalidated the lap, because it was not an improvement. And unfortunately for Chris Pauley, He is starting for a 9th, and here are your qualifying results. It's Will Fulks on pole from Jonathan Murphy in the pro category. 2.4 seconds separates the pole leader from second place in the pro category. And it's Pete Plastow, James King, Ben Cullen, Jack Goring. Then it's Dan Cross, Matthew Forrest, Chris Pauly, and Ethan Lee rounding out the top 10 in the pro category. And then it's Toby Andrews, Chris Boland, Tom Stevens, Adam Barron, Scott Darville, Matt Chambers, and Jack Trunwit. 6 seconds off the pace in the end, rounding out the pros. Then in the AM category, it's Craig Ledoux who lines up at the head of their field, and of course at the head of the grid. He, of course, lines up on the front row. Glenn Berry in second in the AM category. And it's Mark Gladwell, Scott Eastwood, Joshua Lindsay, and Ben Weston rounding out that 6-car field this evening. But as I mentioned, Joseph, the real big talking point was Will Fulks starting on pole by well over 2 seconds. But it's the real talking point, amateur on the front row.
Yeah, basically unheard of. But that is exactly what I was talking about earlier on. Rain is a great equaliser, and that's exactly what we have seen this evening. So it's exciting to be seeing what an AM driver can do at the very top. Of course, he's not going to care about the championship ramifications in terms of for the AM category, because that's what he will be competing in. He will care about that. He won't care about anything to do with the pros, and it's just about trying to maintain that position for as long as he possibly can. It's going to be very tricky, though, to be able to do so, as everybody now lined up on the grid, and we will get our race underway very shortly. 40 minutes of racing around Spa-Francorchamps. No frills, no nonsense here tonight. We will just have a straight 40-minute race, which gets underway now. It's a poor start for Craig Ledoux on the front row, unfortunately, and he's going to be off at the first corner. 3 cars going off, in fact, and 1 going straight back across the cars in the further down pack. So big dramas for everybody further down. Meatball flag for Craig Ledoux. I think he was the one pushed across everybody else, and that's a disappointing start to his race. He'll come back in second in class and 11th overall, but with big emotional damage and a decent amount of damage as well.
Yeah, that's a disastrous start for a majority of that back end of the grid. And also, I think it was for Ethan Lee as well, potentially, who was involved in that accident alongside the likes of Matthew Forrest for Ledoux. It was a great qualifying, but it's instantly gone wrong before we didn't even make it to turn 1 before it went wrong. It was a slow start, and then he was sandwiched. There's more contact. That's Ben Cullen getting into Ethan Lee. Actually, it wasn't Ethan Lee involved in that first incident as Ben Cullen spins back across the road. Lee now tumbling down the order. Drivers going left, right and centre. 2 cars off on the XM Ahmed and into the side. There was Joshua Lindsay getting collected, I think. Dan Cross. And there was also one that spun. It was Matt Chambers, who span back across the road. It's an absolute chaotic opening lap of this race. Mark Gladwell has also potentially made a mistake through the Bruxelles hairpin. Might have some damage of his own as he's down to fifth place for now. Glenn Berry, who started down in 20th, is now up into 6th place. What a start from that AM driver, as Adam Barron now looks to the inside here. That's going to be of Ben Weston. He gets the move done nicely and up into 11th place in class, and also will be 13th overall. Matthew Forrest now going to be looking to try get a move done on Tom Stevens, who himself is going to want to get past Ben Weston as quickly as possible. But for Will Fulks at the front of the field, he is 2.7 seconds clear of James King, and I think the calamities there heading into turn 1 really did benefit the number 31 machine, because he was able to escape unscathed.
Certainly did. He was leading the way into the first corner, but second place, of course, having problems, which means that everybody else behind was caught up in sort of any way, and not, of course, what they would have wanted in terms of a way to start this race. But that is indeed the way that they did start the race, and very unfortunate for all the cars. Ben Weston off of the road, and he's going to drop down, moving out of the way for the cars in behind. Maybe a little bit too late in the end to move away, but no damage, no harm for anybody else ahead. He is going to drop right down the order a couple of positions. Not too many, in fact, because of the fact that it wasn't too bad of a spin in the end, but still a small drama that he would have been hoping to avoid as we end our first lap. And Matthew Forrest all over the back of Tom Stevens for 12th place. Can he get a better exit out of the first corner? The answer is minorly. It's not enough to be able to pressure Barron. It's not enough to be able to pressure Stevens even as they head up towards Eau Rouge and Blanchimont on the exit of the first sector. But they will continue their race onwards as if basically nothing had happened. Ethan Lee is having a fight at the moment, trying to look to the inside of Jack Trunwitt as they headed up to Lacombe, but he couldn't quite do so. James King is going to be making a mistake, and Glyn Berry just got a little bit too throttle happy. A huge shunt between himself and Trunwitt, who was unsighted, and Glyn Berry surely has a huge chunk of damage as Trunwitt went straight into the front of him.
Oh, that's so disappointing. Actually, I don't think it was Trunwitt. I think it was Scott Darvill. Cars are going off everywhere at Malmedy. It's like a car park over here. It's just a graveyard of cars. And unfortunately there for Glyn Berry, our second AM driver, who was so far up the field as Ben Cullen has now got the meatball flag as well. But for Berry, who was like the Jew, had a great start to this one. Of course, the Jew had a great qualifying. Berry had a great start to the race and a mistake at Malmedy. And unfortunately for the AM driver, it's being sent straight into collection there by Scott Darvill, who unfortunately was unsighted through the corner. And that's the issue there if you spin at Malmedy and stay on the racing line, isn't it, Joseph? It's the fact it's such an unsighted exit that if you go through the corner at high speeds, like we saw with Darvill, you've got nowhere to go. You can't react in time, and you just head straight first into an accident. And of course for James King in that moment as well, he was having his own semi-accident. I think he just had a spin through the com, and he's now down into 6th place overall. And our highest place now of the amateur drivers is Joshua Lindsay, who's down in 9th place. And Will Fawkes is 5.4 seconds clear of Jack Goring, as Matthew Forrest is off the road now in 13th, as Jonathan Murphy comes into pit lane. I wonder if he got some damage from that spin there for Bury.
Yeah, because of course we can only see the meatball flags. We can only see when the FIA tells the drivers to come into the pit lane. We don't just see the minor damage that they feel as though you could get away with. But into the pit lane comes a couple of drivers, Tom Stevens and Jonathan Murphy, both into the lane on this lap. And they'll be hoping to pick up their race from this point onwards. Chris Pawley chasing for 2nd place now. He's about a second off of the back of Jack Goring currently, and we'll be hoping to catch up to the 1:08 as the race will progress onwards. 6 minutes in, so the first skirmishes have absolutely flown by, and we'll be seeing a few more, I'm sure, as Pawley tries to close in. He is closing in at the moment. The gap between the two was about a second as they headed into the end of the first sector. As they headed into La Source on the exit of the first sector, Pawley finds a little bit more time, but this is where the differences between the driving styles and the cars could come, as the gap between them went back up to a second as they headed into braking zone. Pete Plasto under a lot of pressure from Chris Boland at the moment. This is for 6th and 7th, and Plasto at the moment holding station. Boland, who was about 2/10 back as they headed out of Bruxelles, was ready to pressure, and I'm sure another opportunity will arise.
Yes, certainly should be able to. Of course, in the rain, tyres can overheat if you just potentially put a little bit too much stress on them. As you can see, that dry line is certainly formed. And you just need to make sure you manage those tyres as well. As you get close to the car in front and the tyres start to overheat, you'll start to lose all that time you found. Tom Stevens now running slowly out of the Bruxelles hairpin and down through the Jackie X curve. Of course, in the number 89 machine, 12th overall in the pro category, but overall in the standings, he is down in 14th. Of course, Lindsay and Eastwood in the AM category, both running quite nicely. For Jack Trunwitt, he is going to be trying to get past Eastwood now as they make their way through Stavelot. Trunwitt, of course, was one that went off the road at Malmedy when we saw that huge crash. Talking about huge crashes, that's a car on their roof. That's Josh Lindsay, another one of the front runners in the AM category, having a huge moment. And here we see a replay of it. It's Lindsay having a slide through the curb and a pull threat, and the car completely gets into the gravel, beaches itself, flips over. I don't think your car's meant to be that way up there, Joseph. I don't think that's very optimal.
Only at Adelaide and Melbourne and Sydney Park and all of the racing circuits around Australia and New Zealand, but certainly not at Belgium. I'm not sure how the cars managed to do that, because it just looks like it might have just caught a piece of gravel and then went upside down, but that is very unfortunate. Jack Trunwitt managing to go to the outside line of Scott Eastwood as he heads into the first corner. Is he going to try and sweep around the long way? Yes, he is. Is he going to be able to pull it off? Well, we'll see on the exit of the corner, but that is a big moment and a big incident as well. Jack Trunwitt is going to try and keep his way around the outside, and he makes his way through on Scott Eastwood as the leader of the AM class does succumb the position to Trunwitt, who moves up into the top 11. But we did see it a few times in practice where the cars did that, and that is just another moment. But it's in the race itself where we see that incident. That's a warning sign for a lot of the drivers. Don't do that. Don't go onto the gravel there, and certainly don't flip the car.
Yeah, I think it was just the fact he was sideways. The car dug into the gravel, of course, at that stage, and then your car just will flip over. As I think that was someone off heading down the hill. It was someone off heading down the hill. Not sure who that is. It's Dan Cross, who's now dropping down throughout the field. He's off at Malmedy as well. A lot of drivers really struggling with Malmedy. And of course, I feel like as well, I think it was for Adam Barron with that incident there for Lindsay. He was one that had to avoid onto the gravel as well through the curve of the Paul Freya. And of course there, Joseph, at that stage, he must have been caught completely off guard. He would have got jump scared, code brown moment, a car's on its roof in front of me, what do I do? And just reacted hard right into the gravel. And luckily for him, he didn't have a moment himself to cause even more chaos throughout that corner and even more of a challenge for the drivers behind to navigate.
Yeah, real big problem for the drivers behind to navigate as the fastest lap goes in for Will Fulks at the very top of the order, 2-minute 23.330 for our race leader at the moment, and he's got a gap of 7.5 seconds to Jack Goring in second place, a huge gap by any stretch of the imagination. He will continue to lead the way. Jack Goring will continue to run in second place, and then Chris Pauly 1.7 off of the back, but they look like the guaranteed top three unless anything goes wrong here today with James King 10 seconds off, but they're certainly the guaranteed top three off at the end of the first 10-15 minutes or so. Dan Cross in 12th place in class and 13th place overall. Now having a look at Tom Stevens, who of course was running slowly a couple of laps ago, has managed to get a little bit more up to speed once again, has the 89, but that doesn't stop the pressure from coming from the cars, but in behind Dan Cross being the latest one to try to apply it to the 89, and he'll be to the inside line of the first corner potentially, but no, Dan Cross just not with the exit, not with the overspeed into turn one, and he's going to try and go again on the exit of La Source and up towards Eau Rouge and Radion, but the slipstream is going to be opened up for Dan Cross here. Is he going to be able to make his way through on Tom Stevens? It might be up through the Kemmel Straights. He's going to try to pull alongside, but nope, not quite got the overspeed once again. Stevens defending well here. Cross with the slipstream though as they head towards Lacombe.
Yeah, here we are then with Tom Stevens and Dan Cross making their way into Lacombe. Of course, you can see the sun's starting to come out now. That will help with the track drying. The rain has stopped, I think, and we are now getting into that stage of the race where the dry line should start to form. But I think a little bit later on, as there's Tom Stevens round, Dan Cross has to slam on the anchors, and he says, thank you very much. A cheeky position picked up there from me. I'll take that as easy as you like. But that certainly would have been another big Code Brown moment for Dan Cross, who went off himself on the previous tour. Ben Weston is in second in the AM category. He's 2.9 seconds behind Scott Eastwood, who is just in front, I believe, of that battle we just saw between, of course, Stevens and that was also Stevens and Cross. And Will Fulks once again sets the fastest lap of the race. He is absolutely flying out in front. The driver's taking no liberties as well with track limits for Blanchemont, as we see two drivers there of James King and Pete Plasto going right off the road and kicking up a whole load of spray onto the circuit. It would certainly help with tyres cooling down, but I don't think he wants to be out there either. Will not help with traction out of Blanchemont, especially going through such a high-speed exit. Very easy to spin the car around, but Ethan Lee on that last lap, 1.8 seconds quicker than his fastest attempt. He's getting put under pressure from Plasto, who's starting himself lead to put some pressure onto James King in front. He's managed to recover up into 4th place in class. Did drop down to 6th after his earlier moment. Plastow completely cuts across the Radeon exit, and this might now give him the opportunity to get the run on lead, but no, got the slowdown and has to completely let off the throttle.
Yeah, at the moment, just had to completely let off the throttle, which is very unfortunate indeed, because then he can't get the run up the road. Mark Gladwell, 3rd place in the AM class, has a mistake, and he's going to drop further down. I don't think he's going to drop too many positions. He's certainly not going to drop down in class. But what is going to happen is, I think that might be Ben Weston, who's been able to get ahead of him. Is 8/10 ahead of Gladwell now. Very unfortunate moment for himself. And we will see what he's going to be able to do throughout the rest of the course of this race. Because, of course, you have to set yourself up incredibly well. Because you have a mistake. That's absolutely fine. Everybody makes mistakes, but it's about how you recover from them, which is going to be the difference between those who finish at the top and those who finish at the bottom. And Mark Gladwell now has to get his head down. He knows he won't be able to drive at 100% straight away, but maybe he does a couple of laps at 80%, and then he gets himself back up to full speed as Dan Cross on the back of Jack Trunwitt, looking for a move maybe to the inside, but no, Jack will just hold him off for the time being. And the 24 clings on to 10th place for another couple of corners.
Yep, he certainly does indeed, as that's potentially one of the cars that are a lap down, just pulling out to the left-hand side. I think that could potentially have actually been there. Glyn Burry, who moved over to that left-hand side. It was Glyn Burry who moved over to that left-hand side there. So he's 30 seconds off closest competitor Scott Darville in front of him. Of course, those two had huge amounts of contact out of Malmedy a little bit earlier on in this race. And Dan Cross into the back of Jack Trunwitt, who went wide. Slammed on the anchors, did Trunwitt, and Cross no time to react and went straight into the back of Trunwitt's car. And unfortunately for Cross, nothing he could do, as we see the number 24 slid off the road and Cross straight into the back of him. Trunwitt was just trying to keep the car on the circuit there, Joseph, and unfortunately for Cross, an innocent bystander with the number 24 slamming onto his brakes that aggressively.
Yes, he certainly is. At the moment, as was that a little bit of rain I saw on the front of the screen. We will see later on. It certainly looks as though it might be raining out there on the circuit. As we get to the halfway point of this race, it has started to rain here at Spa-Francorchamps. Not sure how heavy the rain is at this point in time as Jack Trunwitt later onto the brakes, but into the pit lane is the number 24. So I think that answers our question. I said I'm not sure how strong the rain is. Well, Trunwitt's into the lane, and he's the only one at the moment, apart from Adam Barron. Will they be joined very soon by more drivers who feel as though it's the time to dive into the pit lane? We will wait and see, but it's certainly looking very interesting indeed to spice up the second half of this race here at Spa.
Yes, certainly would be indeed, as of course we will see everyone into the pit lane at some stage, being an endurance race. And of course with these drivers, especially Will Fulks, he's got a big enough lead to just really not worry about an undercut effect. Of course at the moment his gap over Jack Goring is 7 seconds. I would not be surprised if that, by the time we get into the pit lane, goes up to something like 14 seconds, potentially even doubles in stature. And for Pete Plastow, who we're now on board with, he's trying to hunt down James King, was able to get past Ethan Lee, who potentially might have made a mistake, because he's now 6.8 seconds behind on the number 312. And with this rain starting to form, Trunwitt has switched to the wet compounded tyres. Of course, that's probably why we've seen so many drivers struggle for a majority of this race. It's the fact they've been on that dry compound so far here, Joseph. And for, of course, Trunwitt, he's going for the wets. How much faster will he be? And how much of an effect will this rain have? It's had a big effect for James King, as he's gone round on the exit of the bus stop chicane. Took a little bit too much curb, and on a dry tyre, on a corner that, of course, still hasn't fully dried out yet, you're going to see yourself go around if you use too much of that painted curb. That's exactly what happened to King. Is now on the dry line itself, we're starting to see that spray slowly start to form.
Yeah, we certainly are seeing that spray start to form, which will not be what the drivers would have wanted to see. They don't want that spray to form. They don't want the conditions to get trickier, because they'll just want to be able to keep going in the rhythm they've got. But no, they'll have to step out of the rhythm, and they'll have to start thinking about their braking points once again. I think from now until the end of the race, it'll be the same scenario where the conditions on track will be changing, and so they have to adapt. Craig Ledoux looking to the inside line of Matthew Forrest. Forrest holding on to position at the moment. But as you can see on the back of Craig Ledoux's car, there is no rear wing on that AM number 13, so I'm not sure how he's managed to keep it going, but he's doing a very good job nonetheless to keep it going to the inside of Matthew Forrest into Pouon. Is he able to make the move? Yes, he is. That seemed nice and easy in the end, but of course, no rear wing. The downforce is going to be all askew.
Well, you can see that here, Joseph, the Jew's gone for a fast car in Sector 1 and Sector 3 and a big slide through Campus Corner and another one and into the gravel. It was worth the effort. I mean, in the middle sector, that car is going to be very slippery indeed. The rear of the car going to be just snaking all the time. He did well to keep it for so long and actually get a move done onto Forrest. Now, fair play. Round of applause to the Jew for being actually able to go into the inside into Pouon. But of course, now, as we head up into Blanchemont, he's going to be lightning fast. Some drag-saving options, I think, here, Joseph, by removing that rear wing to see if he can go that little bit faster down the straights and potentially, like we saw there on Forrest, get some moves done and try and get back on this lead lap.
Yeah, he's going to really try and get back onto the lead lap, is Craig Ledoux, because, of course, he does have that pace, but he doesn't quite have the grip out there at the moment because, of course, the damage that he has suffered from it's really not going to help him at this point in time as well, he heads down the straight one more time. He's continuing on, so he's a brave soldier out there fighting, and will be continuing on with his race. Right, from this point now, I don't think he's going to be coming into the pit lane again unless it's to switch to a set of the wet compound tyres. Then maybe we'll be seeing what he can do in terms of the changes of the tyres, but he may well be waiting for the point to do it, where he can actually come into the pit and make that switch, and of course do it in the pit window, which would make a lot more sense for him to do. But it's just about how hard it is going to be to cope with the tyres and how hard it's going to be to cope racing overall out there at the moment. Chris Boland finds himself in 7th place, and the 86 has had a pretty good race indeed, has Boland, finding himself, of course, within the top few in position, and of course in and around where he is in the championship standings. He's in 8th in the standings, he's in 7th right now, and he'll look to continue on as Matthew Forrest and Craig Ledoux's fight will wage on for another lap.
Yeah, it certainly does, and Ledoux has been able to get back past on Matthew Forrest, and Ledoux back up in front of the number 78, who is just gained up to 14th, because I think something's happened to Matt Chambers, because he's now out of the race, as I can see on the timing graphic. Jack Goring is starting to put some pressure onto Chris Pauly as well. Pauly's been able to get past on Jack Goring. Ledoux's got black flagged, so potentially had a meatball flag. Stayed out for too long, and it's now been black flagged as Pauly went off the road at Stavolo. These drivers on the slicks are certainly starting to fade, and unfortunately here for Goring through Pouon, this is what happened to him. He had a spin. Those slick tyres, certainly not what you want to be on at this stage. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more drivers now coming to the pits for the wets, because especially through that middle sector, we are going to see a lot of drivers have these kinds of incidents, as that was Ledoux into Forrest. That's what caused the black flag for Craig Ledoux. And I think that was just a little bit of a rage quit there, as Ethan Lee had a spin and he nearly dug and flipped over through Curva de Paul Freya, the number 63. Many drivers making mistakes now as this track starts to get in worse and worse conditions, as Goring and Pauly are into pit lane along with Will Fulks. They've all called it quits on the slicks, and I think there Jack Goring might have just missed his pit box ever so slightly. Well, not missed, undershot his pit box and had to speed up.
Yeah, potentially so. That can be something that you can do in this game if you are just struggling on your way into the pit lane. I think that might be what they've done as we get more drivers out of the pit lane, some drivers into the pit lane as well, of course, as now appears to be the time to make the crossover. It might be when they're talking to their engineer who is saying box now, box about 5 laps ago. I don't know why you didn't do it. So I think those who boxed earlier on will be reaping the rewards in a couple of laps time when everybody has dived into the pit lane and they've had the opportunity to stay out through all of that. Jonathan Murphy up in second place at the moment, 2.5 off of the back of Will Fulks. He's closed the gap to our leader, of course, but he is going to continue on. For Tom Stevens, he is in 10th, big slide into the wall, not able to save it this time. That's going to be damage on the 89, and this is turning into a race of attrition.
It certainly is, as that was a replay of that Stevens accident. Murphy still on the dry tyres, I believe, hasn't pit just yet. Stevens has now received a black flag as well, so he's unfortunately made one too many mistakes. Chris Boland is now behind James King in all this, so this pit stop window has helped some, has not helped others. And for the 86, hunting down the 23 for now. That gap is coming down on the slipstream, but it just will not be close enough at this very stage. And for Jonathan Murphy so far, even though he is on those slick tyres, he's bringing that gap down at certain stages to Will Fulks. I say that, the gap's just gone up by about a second through the middle sector as Toby Andrews must have had a moment because he's now had a meatball flag himself for repairs. For Boland, nearly into the back there, King, as we head into the Bruxelles hairpin. You can see a difference in line has helped Boland close up to the back of the 23 through the hairpin and now through the Jackie X curve. He's just going to have to sit behind once more. And I think Murphy might have just made a mistake or is coming into pit lane because he's now 13 seconds behind Fulks. And this is what happened to Murphy. And it's just like what we saw for Goring there, Joseph. He had a slide, wasn't able to save it through Pouon. And it's just so slow to get the car stopped as it just aquaplanes over the water.
Yeah, that seems to be the nature of these crashes here today, or the incidents here today, because they're not necessarily all going out of the race. It's a case of just slow, because they are almost saving them. They have the opportunity to save them, or so they think, and so it seems. But after all is said and done, it's just a slow and miserable slide into the wall, I would imagine. And so they will continue on for the time being after losing maybe 20 seconds sliding down the pit lane or sliding down any part of the circuit where they can have an incident. Jonathan Murphy now defending from Chris Pauly, desperately trying to stay out there, but I think it's just a crazy idea. And yeah, indeed, he does come into the pit lane. He's realised what a crazy idea it is, and into the lane he will come to make the switch of tyres, and he will be jumping over to another set of tyres, and now you'd imagine it'll be the wets that'll be coming out on, unless he's an absolute madman. But yeah, we have 15 or 14 even minutes left in this race, and so I'd imagine we won't be seeing the weather conditions change once again, but what we will be seeing is potentially the weather conditions just get a little worse.
Yeah, it certainly could be that the fact that this rain starts to hammer down even more and we get to a point where, of course, we get drivers on the wets really starting to make mistakes and spin themselves because, as I've previously mentioned, no traction control, no ABS. As Ben Weston's gone all the way off the road there at Blanchimont. Dan Cross says, thank you very much. I'll take that position from you. And Toby Andrews has now been black flagged after getting the meatball flag himself. So he has had a real horror show of the past couple of laps, but you can just see how heavy this rain is now, Joseph. It's at this stage where, of course, those puddles are really going to start to form, and especially down the bottom of hills like Erosion Radion. Just as you're heading up the hill, there's going to be a huge sheet of water, just a massive puddle that drivers could then go straight over, and that could be them aquaplaning straight off at Radion. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rain does now lie onto the circuit, how the puddles form, how the drivers have to manage going around these puddles, and what mistakes do get made. As Jonathan Murphy came out in ninth place, and of course, in conditions like this, as you mentioned in qualifying, the rain is the great equaliser, but it also could be the ruining moment of a race. And for Will Falk, someone who's dominated this race so far, all it will take is one moment and it could be race over.
Certainly could. There is one moment for the drivers, and we will see what they, you know, how they recover from it, because that one moment could be race defining, or they could completely ignore it and move on with no such problems. It's going to be a difficult balance to strike. But of course, the more experience they get, the better they will be at striking that balance as Jack Goring continues on to another lap of racing. But yeah, he is very much struggling at the moment in terms of the pace. I think everybody is struggling very much for the moment at the pace, and Jack Goring, well, he's not got anybody else to worry about, so sometimes that can be to your benefit, which means you're not under pressure from anybody behind. Sometimes that can be to your detriment, because those people behind might be G'ing you on and continuing you on and helping you along as well. What's happened there?
Craig Ledoux has been disqualified from the race. So the champion leader, championship leader, sorry, should I say, who qualified on the front row of the grid, the best qualifying from our amateur driver all season. The headliner qualifying, when it rains, it certainly does pour for poor Ledoux, because he has now not only had an incident on the first lap, not only driven without a rear wing, he is now disqualified completely from the race. Matthew Forrest is also retired. I just saw that as the timing tower was flicking through. So unfortunate for Forrest to see him, unfortunately, depart as well. But how the difference a session makes, isn't it, Joseph? From hero to zero there for the Jew, and for his championship chances, that's going to be a lot of points now gone and into Eastwood's favour, who himself in the AM standings lines up just behind him by only a matter of 2 points. So for Eastwood, a big points haul over the man he's fighting with in the championship, and he's going to have now a healthy advantage over the next fastest car.
He certainly will. He certainly will indeed, and he'll hope to continue that momentum up towards the end of the race and end of the season, because of course Eastwood leads this race, and now after this one will lead the championship. But yeah, it's going to be very good indeed for the rest of this season. Of course, we will be with not too many races to go, in fact, in this season. We'll be seeing the end of our season in around round number 10, of course. So we're around halfway through is what I was going to say. But yeah, halfway through this race, and halfway through this season, over halfway through this race, over 3/4 through this race. 9 minutes and 15 seconds left to go, and so a lot of the positions have been decided already. One of them, Will Fulks in first place, one of them, Jack Goring in second, unless they make any mistakes late on in this race. And we'll be seeing will we be seeing any more moves throughout the course of this race? Potentially Jonathan Murphy, you can see just catching up to the two in front of him, Adam Barron and Ethan Lee. You can also see Mark Gladwell close to the back of Joshua Lindsay, so that might be a fight late on for the amateur podium.
Yeah, it certainly could be a fight for the AM podium. Gladwell will want to get onto that podium. For Lindsay, I believe it could be one of his first podiums in the AM class. Currently lies 6th in the championship. Gladwell is only 5th in the championship himself, so this could actually be for championship position in the amateur class. And for Josh Lindsay, he has got so far this season. We'll have a look at what he got last week, of course, at Thruxton, where in the sprint race 2, let's have a look at his most recent result. It was a 4th place, and in race 1 last week, it was also a 4th place. So it would end the drought here if he's able to get onto the podium here, Joseph, of being the bridesmaid, at least in the past 2 races. And the man who's denied him of said podiums in those races was Mark Gladwell. So it'll be a little bit of revenge as well to at least potentially even jump Gladwell in the championship standings, and also deny him in the same fashion he got denied by Gladwell in those final few races last week.
Yeah, and more information for you. Second place in the amateur qualifying currently finds himself in fifth. Glimberry has also received a black flag. So for the car in fifth place, unfortunate. Scott Eastwood into the pit lane and Jonathan Murphy into the inside line. He's going to try and make his way through massively off of the road, and that's a black flag for him. And we'll be seeing a few of those as they reach up to the maximum incident points allowed, of course, iRacing's system for contacts and for off-roads. And Jonathan Murphy massively off the road at Lacombe and well, adequately penalised. Will Folks will be hoping that he is not going to be penalised throughout the course of the rest of this race, as Scott Eastwood out of the pit lane now, still ahead of Ben Weston, so still in the lead of that class. Will Folks, big lead here, and you don't feel as though there's anything that he can do he can do wrong to drop that position off of the top of the pros, as the amateur standings, Scott Eastwood will lead, and Ben Cullen will chase him down on track.
I think Gladwell has had a moment because he's now dropped 7 seconds behind Josh Lindsay. And this will be Lindsay's first way. Oh, as Gladwell went straight on at Campus Corner. This is a replay of what happened. And unfortunately for the number 80, he went straight on when trying to put the pressure onto Lindsay, crumbled himself under his own pressure. And unfortunately, that's given Lindsay a 7-second lead in that battle for the podium. And this will be Lindsay's first trip to the podium since the second race of the season. Since that second race at Donington, it'll be his first trip back. And from that point, a highest finish of 4th, 4 separate times. He has been the bridesmaid of the AM category this season since that Donington Park opener. And for Ben Cullen, he's starting to put Scott Eastwood under a lot of pressure. But I think here for Eastwood, to be fair, Joseph, of course, he would love to finish in front of another one of the pro drivers. But I think for himself in the AM category, with such huge points on the line against Craig Ledoux, he won't fight this one too aggressively, as there goes Cullen to the inside. And Eastwood does not put up much of a fight. He's thinking of his own championship and how much of a points haul he can get over Ledoux. He's going to have a healthy advantage come the end of this one, with 5 more minutes to go for Eastwood. And also that will for Eastwood, sorry, he's only got in the lead of that AM category around about 3 more laps to get this one home.
Yeah, 3 more laps for the end of this race, as out of the pit lane comes Jonathan Murphy, who, of course, massively sent himself off at Lacombe, so now finds himself back out of the pit lane, trying to maximise the grip that he's got by strapping on a new set of tyres. For the end of the race, we've got 15 of the pro cars left. We've got 5 of the amateur cars left, and that means that we'll be ending the race with 20 when we started with 23. So not too bad of a retention rate, as Dan Cross now all over the back of the car in 9th place, of course, who just came out of pit lane. Jonathan Murphy's going to defend potentially to the middle of the track, so Dan Cross is going to have to find himself a way through, around or up and under, but not any doing at the moment. Just remains in that fight. Is there going to be any opportunity on the exit of the Lacombe section? No, there's not. So it's just about continuing on for Cross and trying to make an opportunity work, because he knows that Murphy ahead has made a couple of mistakes.
Yep, he certainly does know that. Of course, Murphy on colder tyres as well, since he came out the pit lane, had to be trundling down that pit lane as well. You can see how wet this track has got since the beginning of this race. Of course, we had very much a dry line down into Pullen, and for a majority of the circuit, drivers were on the dry tyres, and now it is spray wherever you look. And for Cross, he's getting closer and closer to the back of Murphy in front of him, not able to look for a move into Campus Corner. Of course, that spray will be battering the windshield of the 263, and this is for 9th place in class. This is some big points here for Cross, a nice top 10 finish, and he would love to get an extra position on the cars as he looks through Curva to Paul Frere. This could be a good slipstream moment now up the hill into Blanchemont. Murphy with a little bit of a slide as well. That could give Cross the momentum he needs to look for a move into the bus stop chicane. Of course, the slipstream effect will be monumental heading up the hill, as you can see there. Look how rapidly he's gaining. He's had to lift off the throttle. Did not want to go side by side through Blanchemont, but slides and understeers wide. And Murphy with the better exit might just be able to hold on to the move as we head onto the brakes. Murphy defends the inside line. And yes, the number 7 does just about hold on through the bus stop chicane, but Cross really starting to apply this pressure, Joseph.
Very much trying to apply the pressure at the moment, really trying to find his way through at any point on this lap. But there is not going to be a chance just yet. But with just over 7 kilometers of racing around this lap, you'd think that there will be chances for the 263 to make his way through on the 7. Jonathan Murphy has been pushed on and has improved his lap times as we head on to what will be the penultimate lap, and Pete Plasto and Chris Boland fighting late on for the top 4. Is Chris Boland going to be able to make his way through, or is Pete Plasto going to be able to hold on? Well, for the moment, it's going to be Plasto who holds on to 4th place, but Boland will seek opportunities. Is there one to the inside? Not quite, but Boland did have a look. He did commit to making that move to the inside, but he will not make his way through. You can see, though, that he is desperate to find his way past the 312 by any means necessary.
Oh, he certainly is indeed. Boland, who, of course, in the last time we had an endurance race, had that moment with Jack Goring at Silverstone, and that cost him any chance of a potential podium, and he will now want to at least get a top 4 finish in this one, and a podium could be on the cards if he has the pace to catch up to Plasto, up to Paulie, as we've got the final lap of the race underway. Wolfhawks has crossed that start-finish line, and he has commenced this final tour of the circuit, and for Boland, he's looking for it more and more as he gets closer to the back of Pete Plasto. Is he going to be able to get the move done into the bus stop chicane? You can see the spray being kicked up off the curb, and he's got to look to the inside line here into Blanchimont. Boland late onto the brakes. Can he get it stopped though on that inside line? It's going to be slicker. He's going to take more of an abrasive line into the corner, and he's still just been able to get the car rotated through. It was a narrower line. He went wide through the first part of the bus stop, but was able to get it stopped for the second part. But you can see Plasto will not give this one up without a fight as he looks to the inside into the first corner. Nothing being done there. Lovely from Boland through the puddles, and was still able to keep the car facing in the right direction.
Yeah, still able to keep it going in the right direction is he, and very good redirection for himself. Chris Boland holds himself in 4th place onto the final lap. Pete Plasto tried to pressure, but he won't quite get close enough down the Kemmel Straight. There will be, I think, one more chance for him to make his way through, and that's if he can set himself up well into the bus stop chicane. But no, I don't think Pete Plasto is going to be able to get close enough. 9/10 off of the back of Boland at the moment, and that gap is only increasing between the 312 and the 86. So for Plasto, he won't be able to come back at Boland. The 86 has managed to make his way through and will hold that 4th place. And you can see, yeah, the difference between the two. Clearly, Chris Boland quite likes these wet conditions, and he'll be reveling in them as we head through towards the final couple of sectors. There's only 2 more sectors for these drivers in this race, and you can see it's absolutely chucking it down out there on the circuits. But for Will Foulkes, it's been an absolutely incredible performance. He has led from the start, of course. Second place on the grid, Craig Ledoux had his issues. That caused problems further back, but you have to be in position. You have to have the pace to capitalise on it, and that's exactly what Will Foulkes had. He had about a 3-second gap when that mistake happened. It is up to 21.4, so it is not only luck, it is also incredibly well managed. And the 31 will take the victory here at Spa-Francorchamps. Our first non-UK round of the season is won by Will Foulkes in the pro class. Second place will be Jack Goring at quite a distance down the road. Will Foulkes' incredible performance from himself to win, and Jack Goring will be heading through the bus stop chicane now. 23 seconds off of our race leader. He's coasted to the end. 23 seconds behind Will Foulkes, 23 seconds ahead of Chris Paulie, and it's second wrapped up for the 108, and Paulie will come across the line 3rd to end our 5th round of this season, and that will decide the podium. Of course, we had a couple of amateur drivers tease for it, but in the end, it will be Paulie who will take this one home.
Yep, he certainly will indeed. And for Will Foulkes, he gets now the biggest winning margin of the season. He held, of course, the record at Donington when he won at 16 seconds in the first race. But here in the endurance at Spa, You would expect nothing less. He takes that crown, and it's 24 seconds in the end. That separates the top two as Scott Eastwood is driving around in the lead of the AM category without a bonnet. The front of the car is completely destroyed, so I wonder if he made a mistake anywhere. But he is just now making his way through Blanchimont. As you can see, here is Eastwood driving along. He's had a moment and into the wall at the exit of Radeon. Luckily enough for him, closest competitor, Western, is a lap down to him. So he won't lose that AM race lead. But when he needed to bring it home nice and safely, Lamost here, Joseph, he's made a mistake. And for Western, he's not close enough to capitalise, luckily. So for him, it's very lucky, Eastwood, that he had such a big margin to begin with.
Yeah, it was very lucky, but he did make it up. He did build up that gap, so it's almost unsurprising that he was able to build it up. But in the end, it is going to be the victory, of course, for Scott Eastwood in that class, and Joshua Lindsay off the road and off back into the pit lane as we round out for today's action. Everybody comes to the line and finishes off their laps. Just a few of the cars back out on circuit still trying to come to the end, but it was a good race, all things considered, and a very good race indeed from our leaders in both of the classes. But it feels like there's a couple of storylines that could have been weaved that unfortunately had to be cut halfway through. The likes of Craig Ledoux, the likes of Glyn Berry, who could have fought at the top, but were unfortunate that they weren't able to do so.
Yeah, it's unfortunate there for Ledoux and Berry, who of course were in that AM class. Of course, as we know, Ledoux was the talking point of qualifying. I've said it a lot, but he really was, and unfortunately for him, it has not worked his way. But here is the pro standings after that race. This is how they finished up in the pro class. It was Will Fulks who took a dominant victory of 24.6 seconds, the biggest of the season, from Jack Goring in second, Chris Pauly third, Bowden fourth, Plastow fifth, sixth for King, seventh for Lee, Barron, Cross and Murphy round out that top 10. Heading into the second half of the field, it was Drunwit who finished in 11th. Ben Cullen was the last of those pro drivers to finish on the lead lap in 12th. It was Stevens, Andrews and Darville one lap down. And Forrest and Chambers were our two retirements from the pro category. Heading, of course, shortly into the AM class. Here we are. It's Eastwood who took that victory by a lap over Ben Weston. Domination from Scott Eastwood. He takes the record for the biggest win in his own individual class, but overall it will be for Will Fulks. But it is then Ben Weston, Joshua Lindsay, who finally returns to the podium after what has been a long time gone, as he returned since the second race at Donington. Then it's Mark Gladwell in fourth, Glyn Burry in fifth, Craig Ledoux, who got disqualified, in sixth, and rounds out that field. And that was, Joseph, a very spectacular race. And overall, of course, for Fulks, we expect nothing less from him. He has dominated every session he's been a part of. Every session so far this season, be that at Donington, be that at Thruxton, be that at Spa. He has topped qualifying and either both the races or here tonight, the individual race. He has not come lower than first all season long. He's just unstoppable. What will there be to stop this man? Because even changeable conditions can't even do that.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be the case that it can't. So maybe a mystery for next week will be what's able to stop him if he hasn't competed around that circuit, of course, before. But yeah, a great performance from him. And well, he'll continue on to the next few rounds of the season. I hope that he can do the same all the way to the end. Yeah, it's a very good performance indeed. We'll see if we're going to be able to drag anybody in for interviews. But for the time being, I mean, it was just Spa-Francorchamps. I'd say that circuit more than any other is great to watch when rain starts, because it only rains on certain parts of the circuit, so it creates a challenge for the drivers that they will have never competed before.
Oh yeah, 100%. That was certainly a challenge for most of the drivers, where of course some of the circuit could be dry and then the next half of it could be wet. I've had very similar scenarios myself when driving, especially on iRacing at the likes of the Spa 24 Hour, where half of the circuit was completely bone dry at the first part and the final sector, but you get to the middle sector, the where you need the grip the most, and it's completely soaked. And it's one thing that I think makes Spa such a special circuit when it comes to those kinds of conditions, where it really keeps you on your toes, and it can make it so those changeable conditions races, neither tyre is faster than the other. They both have their strengths, they both have their weaknesses at certain parts of the circuit, and that's what really does bring into action those, of course, moments in the race where you got to be on your toes. But luckily for these drivers here, Joseph, tonight, they were able to, of course, have that complete downpour all across the circuit, and they knew when to change the tyres once it started to get a little bit too wet. It was wet all over the track instead of one individual area.
It certainly was. It seemed to be that when it rained, it did pour, and well, we will see what it was like from a driver's perspective. As well, we'll get the opportunity to speak to James King. Now, James, of course, it was a very interesting one from dry to wet. But first, just tell me about your race from your perspective.
Well, it was a little bit up and down, to be fair. In practice, I wasn't really looking forward to it. I felt like I was way off the pace. Then all of a sudden, we came to the mixed conditions of quali, and I almost put it on the front row, but unfortunately, I messed that up. And the start of the race, avoided the early incident and ran away with P2 for a lap before I then binned it myself, and then just spent the rest of the time trying not to do more damage to myself. No, I'm quite happy with coming away with P6, so not too bad at the end of the day.
Yeah, didn't seem too bad at all in terms of where you ended up, but it was a topsy-turvy race. Would you say it was a race of attrition?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I spent the last 15 minutes praying that I wouldn't get any more off tracks because I was up to 14, so well within range of a penalty. And then, yeah, seeing the other incidents that people were having, I probably would have been about P10, I think, if the whole race had been clean for everyone. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of worked out for me, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, it did seem to really work out for you in the end, where everybody was making mistakes, and it was just about trying to make your way through. When it turned over to the rain conditions, just how difficult was it to be able to adapt?
Well, it was tough because we'd spent the previous 45 minutes learning the track, getting faster and faster, and all of a sudden it was like someone flicked a switch and all the grip had gone again. And when you've got corners like Eau Rouge, which is too terrifying in the dry, and you put puddles there, it's a terrifying experience. And you're losing 10-15 seconds compared to dry pace.
Yeah, you certainly are. But yeah, that's all from me. Max, have you got anything before we let James go?
Yeah, a couple from me, James. Of course, a 6th place finish. It was a very strong drive from yourself, but there was a few moments when, of course, you were in that dry phase of the race, just where you had a few spins or a few bits going wrong, where you went a little bit wide. Just how difficult was it to be on those slicks and having to keep it on those somewhat train tracks of a dry line and to manage the car sliding out from underneath you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge challenge. You're there trying to keep your eyes peeled as best you can to spot the puddles or the damp patches in comparison to the dry line. I think we noticed, obviously, Eau Rouge was bad. The exit of Les Combes, there was a line across the middle of there, which was, that's what caught me out and made me have my spin early on. And where was the other drama we had? I think it was the middle of the Fagnes chicane. There was a lovely damp patch on the sort of the transition between the two wet corners and going through the second part of it. So trying to keep away from that was probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it certainly seemed a big challenge indeed. And of course, you said about your qualifying as well, nearly put it on the front row of the grid. It was a very strong qualifying from yourself. Just how difficult was it as well to time the end of that qualifying session to make sure you're one of the last ones across the line after doing lap after lap after lap, and making sure at the same point, if you did back off a lap, keep temping the tyres so you can still have a moment to improve on that next attempt?
Yeah, well, that was it. So Chris Boland, he changed off of dries and went on to wet to quali, and he'd quite happily say that he regretted doing that. So I just ran, the entire session. I think I got quite lucky that I was one of the last cars. But yeah, and then 3-4 corners from the end, unfortunately, dipped a wheel in the gravel and threw it all away when I was about 1.9 seconds up on my time.
Oh yeah, it could have been a potential front row start for you there, but yeah, unfortunately you weren't able to get that. But a good race from yourself as well. We were 15th in the standings heading into this one, so a good amount of points scored, and I believe that could potentially put you into the top 10 if I am correct. So yeah, got up into the top 10 in the standings. I bet you're happy with that one.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed it gets me right back up in the order. I mean, I don't expect to be fighting for the championship. There's far too many guys who've joined the championship now who are really quick, which is good. As one of the organisers for it, I'm happy to see that we're getting really strong grids, and the level of competition is really growing. We're 6 years into this championship now, and yeah, I don't mind falling back into the pack if it means we're getting more drivers.
No, yeah, 100%. And of course, one last one from me. Of course, we head over to Spain next week for the mystery round at the Navarra circuit in Spain. Are you confident around that track, or is that a circuit, one of the free tracks that are a little bit of a bogey for you?
It's been a bit hit and miss. So I know that last year when we ran it in the GT4 cars, it was wet and it was horrific. So I think we're going to try and sort of nudge the forecast in a much nicer direction this time. Because there's a really good mix of challenging corners on the track. It's fun to drive. Hopefully it translates into a good result.
Yeah, hopefully it does indeed, and hopefully we see you back in next week, James. So yeah, we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Awesome, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Right, that was James King Joseph. I see we have Chris Pooley also in the waiting room. Of course, he's first podium of the season as well. So shall we speak to the third place man in the pro category?
Of course we should. And well, we'll bring Chris in now. Chris, just talk to us about your race.
Hi, evening, gents. It's that was quite an exciting race. Obviously, tricky conditions throughout. I think Kingy's probably described what it was like. But for myself, just glad to be back on the podium after what's been quite a tricky season, following last season's success.
Yeah, it was good to see you, of course, right at the very top of the order once again. But yeah, I'll just run through the same questions that I asked previously, of course, because it was interesting conditions out there. And just what was your take on it?
Yeah, it was. I struggled in qualifying really to make a decision, to be honest, on what tyre to go on. Got it wrong. Started P10. But that proved to work in my favour in the race. I think it was pretty clear it was going to be slicks, but obviously with the carnage in the first corner, I've just about got through with only minor damage, and by the end of the first lap I was in P3. So the conditions were nice for the first kind of 20 minutes, and then obviously when the rain came down, it was no debate really to go to wets. But I struggled then with the pace, and Chris Boland had me honest until the last lap.
Yeah, it was certainly looking very, very close between the two of you, and of course, the move that allowed you to make your way through. And I just wanted to touch on that first lap drama just one more time. I mean, what was it like from a driver's perspective? Because of course, we only get the offboard shot when we're not watching from inside the car.
again, I was kind of ruining qualifying. I was hoping to be I think I had the pace today to be top 3, top 4, top 5, maybe after qualifying. So starting back in P10, I was a bit frustrated. And then when I saw 3 cars go off, I thought, brilliant, I've got the chance to come back. But then they quickly came back onto the track, so that was challenging. And to be honest, I thought it was going to be race over because I took a hefty hit from the left-hand side. But yeah, luckily slow enough, managed to keep it going, and ultimately, like I said, it worked out in my favour. But yeah, it's definitely a heart in mouth situation, and just praying that you get through unscathed.
Definitely so, and well, for you, it ended up not too bad. Even if you did pick up that damage, it ended up, as you say, working in your favour. That's all from me. Max, have you got anything before we let Chris go?
Yeah, I've got a few questions for you, Chris. Of course, congratulations on your first podium of the season. You seem to be quite handy at these endurance races because your best result of the season before this was at Silverstone when we had our last endurance race of a 4th. So you seem to like this type of format.
Yeah, quite. I seem to settle down in these a little bit better, and obviously points-wise for the season, this works great because it's effectively 2 third places, like I said, 2 fourth places, which is not bad at Silverstone. But I've struggled at the start of the season, definitely with the new car. Obviously, winning last season, but admittedly in GT4s, it's a different challenge, and the pace throughout the field now is just so good. It's with the likes of Jack Gore and David Wrench, and obviously Will Folks. The level has just stepped up another this year, so yeah, but absolutely buzzing with the first podium, and just hoping really I can continue that form for the rest of the season, not just in the endurances but in the sprints too.
Yeah, hopefully you can. You certainly have got some strong momentum now potentially building in the car, and of course talking about your race as a whole, what happened in the pit stop phase? Because I noticed you were ahead of Jack heading into the pits. I'm not trying to bring up any bad memories from the race, but you're ahead of Jack entering the pits, and then you're around about 10 seconds behind on the exit. Was there a miscalculation on fuel, or did something happen on the exit?
100%. Yeah, I thought I was cutting the fuel pretty fine. I actually entered the pits with Jack Goring, and I thought there's a chance to get second place here. What I didn't realise is if you start changing the fuel while you're sat in the pits, you end up doing a second stop or a second fill up. So I added about another 10 litres that I didn't need, and it put me right in the jaws of Pete Plasto. So yeah, that was completely my fault. But ultimately, I think Jack had too much pace after that second stint. So P3 I think is where I was about today.
Yeah, it's still a very good result with that 3rd place. And I mean, at least you can't make that mistake again. You know now. You know that mistake. It's written off the cards.
You'd be surprised with me. I wouldn't rule anything out the cards.
But yeah, of course, as well, throughout the beginning of that race with everybody on the dries in that tricky kind of mixed conditions beginning, we saw a lot of drivers just completely spinning off the circuit, especially just after Le Combe at Malmedy. Just how difficult did you find the track conditions at the beginning there on the slicks? Was it difficult to keep it on the dry line, or were you having a bit more ease than others?
My biggest challenge is I committed to qualifying on the wet tyres, so I very much went into that first lap with no experience on the slicks. So it was a quick and steep learning curve. But I like the mixed conditions, and again, you go to why I think this result's been good for today is probably because of those mixed conditions. So yeah, fingers crossed for more rain in the season.
Hopefully we do, because that provided some brilliant action throughout the race. And of course, talking about these conditions, just how much of a change is it for this car to dry conditions? Is it for you a lot easier to drive in conditions like this, or is it a little bit more on the challenging aspect for you, trying to learn exactly how to put the throttle down as, of course, the car wants to slide out, and to be more lenient on the brakes heading into the corners? Do you prefer that, or prefer the dry running?
I don't know what it is. I find this car quite tricky to drive in the dry, and then with the wet, I think the kind of having less grip, it seems to rotate more for me. I don't know why. It seems to suit my style a little bit more, and the pace works. Like I said, I've struggled a bit at the start of the season to get used to it in the dry. So yeah, not sure. But ultimately, it seemed to go nice today.
Yeah, certainly did indeed. So maybe just liking that front end a little bit more responsive is the way to go. Maybe we see more wet races this season. Definitely not saying that you're going to make it wet, but we'll see later on down the road. And of course, one last one from me. I asked this one to James as well, Chris. We head to the Navarra circuit in Spain next week for the mystery round. Is that a circuit you like, or is it a bit of a bogey track for you?
It's one I don't have a lot of experience of, so I don't mind it. I think it'll suit these cars well, being a large circuit like this as well. So yeah, fingers crossed. Like I said, I'll put the practice in, and who knows, might get another top 3.
Hopefully you do, but we'll let you go, Chris. And yeah, enjoy your evening, and congratulations on your first podium. Well done, mate.
Thanks so much, guys. Cheers.
Well, that was Chris Pooley, and we've got one last driver waiting for us here, Joseph. We've got the amateur race winner, Scott Eastwood. So shall we bring him in for our final interview of the night?
Of course we shall. Well, Scott, welcome to the commentary box. Just, I mean, talk me through your race, because it looked like, from our perspective, it looked like relatively easy in terms of on-track action, but of course you still had to contend with everything happening off, and more specifically above the track.
Yeah, good evening, guys. Thanks for having me in. My game plan was to keep it on the track all the way around. I didn't really expect, looking at the pace that people were putting in qualifying, to actually achieve anything, and I will hold my hands up that I got extremely lucky with those that were much braver than me on the slicks, and it paid off again as well when it started to rain at the end. That I didn't have the confidence to take the slicks from the start, so I stuck with the wets, and then I just rolled from there basically. And I think you kind of probably saw me unravel just on that last lap. That was the sort of, I lost it a couple of times, but I still managed to maintain the forward motion.
Yeah, we did see a couple of moments on the last lap, but of course it was just about making it to the end, and you built up such a big buffer for yourself right up there. And well, I mean, of course, on the first lap we did see a big incident at the very front of the field with the driver that was in the class lead at that point, Craig Ledoux. What was your perspective of it being slightly further back?
I'll be honest, I was concentrating on just trying to avoid everyone, and conscious that if I hit the brakes too hard or did anything too drastic to try and avoid something, that I would have potentially ended up in the car park itself. So yeah, it was yeah, it just flew by really, and I think I was sweating more at the beginning, just trying to stay out of everyone else's way. Again, the pace that Craig had is outstanding. So I've said to him in the Discord that I didn't ever expect to see him again in that race, and then I checked later on and I was like, oh, where's he gone? And his name had disappeared down my my standings board. So
yeah, and as it turned out, it disappeared right to the bottom because he DNF'd from the race. But yeah, it was a very topsy-turvy race for himself. But in terms of, I mean, of course, the championship, that does help a little bit with your specifically championship standings, of course, because I think that does mean that you're the new championship leader. So how is the mentality into the final 5?
Kind of, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm really glad that they've put the amateur side in. You know, not saying that I've never enjoyed the previous years, but being able to have something else to compete to apart from being other traffic on the track, it is fantastic. I've thought that tonight was going to be my drop round. I thought that was going to go horrendously. I thought I was going to be one of the guys that was queuing up in the pits waiting for a coffee and a warm jacket. So I think, without being too cocky about it, I've got my drop round in the bag. So there might be a circuit or two coming up that where I am not anywhere as confident as what Craig is, and especially the others as well. I don't think that I'm out of anyone's league or in any other gap at all. I think there's a lot of people coming up that have got the pace to definitely make this more of a 3-way, maybe even a 4-way fight towards the end.
Yeah, it certainly seems as though it's not as cut and dry as it looks. That's all
No.
from me. Max, have you got anything before we let him
Yeah.
go?
I got a few for you, Scott. Of course, congratulations on that race win.
Thank
You
you.
said that you started the race on that wet compounder tyres, and it did pay off quite nicely because were you a bit shocked to see you had a lap gap to the rest of the YAM field around you?
I'd be honest, I didn't realise it was a lap.
Yep. That
I thought it was
full
in the
on lap.
region when I had the I was going to swear then. When I had the confidence to look down at my overview, I thought I saw it was at like 10 to 15 seconds. I didn't realise it had got so much.
Yeah, at the end of the race, it was a full lap over, I
Oh,
believe it
wow.
was Ben
Okay.
Weston in second place. So,
Right.
yeah, you hold now a record of the season of the biggest win in your respective class. So, how does that feel?
Oh, that's mega. That's fantastic. I mean, it wouldn't have happened again, like I say, without the guys throwing in the and dealing with the. I know that the admin side of things for the admin class as well. Admin class, the amateur class. So yeah, no, that's fantastic news.
It is spectacular to see.
Although
and,
I am sure that if Craig continues with the pace, he's probably going to outdo me at some point.
that's a difficult thing to outdo, and I mean a whole lap on the rest of the YAM category. That's going to be difficult to beat. But yeah, of course, talking about the race as a whole and your moments on the final laps as well. Of course, you were kind of saved with that 1 lap gap in the end. But
Yeah.
was it just you went a little bit too confident through Arouge and Radion and ran a little bit too far wide, which caused the moment?
I was aware that there was someone behind me, and I was thought that my previous, because I had a bit of a spin. I think I don't know what the names of the corners are, but towards the last straight, and I had a bit of I lost it a little bit. And I thought, oh bugger, I'm losing my gap. So yeah, probably a bit of underfoot, too much curb, and then I think I went around all the way round. And I did think at the time I was going to get the meatball out of it. I saw my bonnet fly off and half of the bodywork leave itself on the barrier. Yeah, so I don't know who it was behind, but I was just trying to stay away from them and finish the lap.
Yeah, and you did just that to take the class victory. And I believe at the start you were behind Josh Lindsay when he had his moment through the final sector as well. I think you were battling with one of the pro cars at the time. Was it a little bit of a jump scare to see Lindsay on his lid coming out of the corner?
Oh yeah, I remember now. I came around the corner and my teammate Tom Stevens I think he was behind me, so I was just discussing that if he had the pace, obviously, to come on through because he's in the pro category. And I came around the corner and a few expletives might have come out, but car on the roof was definitely in there, and that was definitely a shock to see as I came round.
Certainly bet it was a Code Brown moment in
Yes,
to see someone on their roof. But of course, with that start as well, did you find a bit of a pace difference between those wets at the start compared to the dries? Were you struggling with a little bit of tyre overheating in the opening stages of that race?
So the pace was definitely apparent with the guys coming up through Eau Rouge over the top and down to Kemmel Straight. They obviously had the dry line there, but I found that in my mind, was more confident going through the twisty downhill sections. And then, lo and behold, and again, I'm nowhere near in their class, but that's where those that weren't getting the dry line 100% were sort of spinning out. And it did play in my mind. I was watching the temps. I think they went up to about 182, not 182, but the pressures were up. And I was just watching them because I'm thinking when I was going to switch over to slicks. And then it started to rain again and they dropped back down. So I was saying, oh, I'll just stay where I am for another couple of laps before I needed my fuel.
Yeah, well, it certainly did play out in your favour with that wet start. And the rain came and saved you at the exact right time as well. But one last one from me before we let you go and enjoy your evening. Of course, we head to the Navarra circuit next week in Spain. Have you driven it much and are you confident around there?
I have driven it a few times. I think GT3s mainly, and GR86s are usually there. I wouldn't say I'm overconfident, but I'm not as scared as I am of Spa in the wet.
Fair enough. That is.
And probably some of the smaller UK circuits. I think this has got a bit more space, which is always fills you with more confidence in a car like the P Cup, because as you've seen, understeering, oversteering, they're very difficult to get right, especially for an amateur like myself. So
Yeah, hopefully you do once again appear on the top step of the podium, and yeah, it should be a good circuit for you, and hopefully, yeah, we see you back next week. Congratulations and enjoy the rest of your evening.
appreciate your time, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Well, Joseph, that was Scott Eastwood, who rounds out our interviews for this evening. But we got one last thing before we can say goodbye to everybody, and that is driver of the day. So who is your vote, Joseph?
It's hard to look past Will Fox, and I know that's the boring answer, but it's hard to look past Will and also Scott, who of course we both spoke to in terms of their performances. But I'm just having a look now, trying to see if there's anybody else who I could give it to. I think it's difficult to look past Will Fox for that for the race victory with the performance that he put in as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. Will Fox is a strong contender. You're going to go for Will. I'm going to go for Scott to get a one-lap advantage over the rest of the class in your field, and he pulled off a magnificent strategy call as well to start on the wets. I think, yeah, I'm gonna give it to Scott. I'm going to be a little bit different. So Scott Eastwood was my driver of the day. But Joseph, I think that is going to be all from us here this evening. I'll quickly run everyone through the remainder of the calendar this evening. So it will be Scott Eastwood, driver of the day. And for the remainder of the season, of course, we head to the Navarra circuit next week, followed by a 40-minute endurance where we head back to Spa. Next week will be a sprint race, sorry, I should say. And then we head to Donington Park once again for an endurance race. And then we finish off the season with a triple header of sprints. We head to Knockhill in Scotland, Alton Park, and Brands Hatch, the season finale. Joseph, what ones of those circuits are you most looking forward to?
I'm biased towards Brands Hatch. I really am, because it's, in terms of the big circuits in the UK, it's one of my it is my local. But Donington Park, I think, it's going to be an interesting one. If it's on the national circuit, then it's going to be a very interesting one indeed. Of course, the Grand Prix layout, not too bad either, but both of them are very, very good indeed. So I'll be looking forward to round 7 in particular. But of course, round 6 is the Circuito de Navarra. So it's very, very MSV sponsored end of the season. In fact, the only round that won't be an MSV circuit is Knockhill. However, that will be it for this evening in terms of the racing action and also the discussion post-race. Make sure to join us next time out for what will be another race. Round number 6 of our season will be heading back to the sprints next time out. So make sure to join us at 8 o'clock next Wednesday. But until next time, it is goodbye.